record button. Thank you. Okay, and let's move on to the next slide. I did post, let me just say, if you haven't seen it in the chat yet, I posted the link to the Jamboard, as Eric said, that we'll be using for our meeting today. We'll be doing a lot of interactive and brainstorming work in the Jamboard. So we're projecting the Jamboard here on Lori's screen. Sometimes it is easier for folks to actually just follow along in a browser window. So if you want to open that up in your browser window, that might just be a little bit easier for you to follow along. And I'll cue you to where we are as we go throughout the session today. So we are currently on slide 3 in the Jamboard, and we just want to say thanks so much to all of you who are with us today. Want you to get a sense of all the invited partners to this effort. It's a really comprehensive group, and we're really excited for the work ahead over the next several months. So let's move ahead onto slide 4. We wanted to do a quick intro, and we're a small enough group. I think we can do that real quickly. If you'd like to practice using Jamboard, I'm going to navigate over there myself and introduce yourself by posting a sticky in the Jamboard on slide 4. As you can see, Lori and I already posted our intros. We'd love for you to share your name, your organization, and a fun fact about you all that you would like to share. And the way to do that is to go over to the sticky note tool on the left. That'll bring up a sticky note for you, and you can just type right into it and hit save, and then cancel out of it, and that'll post your sticky there in the Jamboard. So I'm going to give folks a minute just to get comfortable with it if you haven't done that before, to share a little introductory sticky note with us so we can all say hello. It looks like a bunch of folks are in there with us. Thanks for joining. I'll just give.
For some reason, it's not letting me select a sticky. I can click it. Oh, there it goes.
Is it working now?
Yeah, spoke too soon. Apparently seven times the charm.
Anybody else running into trouble? We thought it would be a good idea. Oh, there we go. There's Nicole, your sticky. Oh, wonderful. So I love the fun facts. So I put on mine that I'm a Little House on the Prairie super fan. I own every episode on DVD, which also conveys to you that I'm a Luddite. So that's my fun fact. Lori, I didn't know you were learning how to knit, so that's really exciting. Great. Let's see here. I'm going to make these a little bit bigger so that folks can read them. This is the other thing that you can do with stickies. All right, so Nicole with SBCTC, you're a sci-fi book reading fanatic. Is there a favorite that you want to share with the group?
I don't have favorites because I just love everything, but I can share what I'm reading right now. It's a 2-book series called The Merciful Crow.
Excellent. Good tip. Thank you. Let's see. So Michael, fun fact, welcome. You got up early this morning to make advocat. Is that how you pronounce it? Cake?
As far as I know, I don't speak German. Advocat.
That's great. That sounds delicious. All right. And Joe, you can say cheers in 10 languages. That's fantastic.
Well, I like to travel, and I find that the best way to connect with people when you travel is usually through cheers and an adult beverage. So they seem to go well together.
That's wonderful. That is great. All right. And Eleni, also with the Workforce Board with Joe and Eric, you only watch sitcoms, mostly with laugh tracks. That's great. Do you have a particular favorite or one you're into now?
sadly, things like Andy Griffith, Father Knows Best.
Those are so fun. That's great.
Yeah,
And-
and I like that they tell me where to laugh. So I want mindless. I want totally mindless.
That's great. And Eric, last but not least, so Seattle Symphony Mega Nerd. Do you have season tickets and go to all the performances?
I've had subscriber tickets for more than 10 years, but I go to like 6 or 7 a year.
That's
But
great.
like I follow them like I follow a baseball team, right? Like I'm kind of obsessed. So yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And they're great. They're probably the best on the West Coast at the moment. So you should go support your symphony.
So are there blogs for that too, like there are for sports
There
teams?
are blogs, in fact, and in case you didn't know, the Seattle Symphony's conductor just left town in very, very controversial circumstances, and they are blogging all over the place about it. So
Ooh,
feel free to Google.
Sounds juicy.
yeah,
So-
really.
Gretchen, this is Terry Redmond. I wasn't able to get my sticky to work. I thought I did. I went into the other screen and saved it, but it seems to not have come to yours. So
Oh,
it's
sorry
weird.
for the trouble.
And I was looking forward to the introduction of that puppy with that beautiful face.
Yeah, Bentley is very active. So,
Well, Terry, why don't then if it's not working for you, hopefully we can figure that glitch out. You want to say hello and share a fun fact about yourself?
sure, I'm Terry Redmond. I'm the director of the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. And a fun fact for me, well, actually, Eric, I like the symphony as well. I'm looking forward to going to the season this year, but I've ridden across Iowa 4 times on a bicycle. So
Wow.
there's a ride that is probably about 50 years old that 25,000 people do this ride each year in July amidst the heat of the Midwest, and I've done it 4 times.
That is fantastic.
Well,
That's
not
very,
because it's wicked hot, but
yeah. That's fantastic. That well, and we can appreciate that, Terry, because Lori and I also do a lot of work in Iowa, and we know it's very big. That's not a short ride. I come to you from Connecticut, so I'm used to very small size states. I mean, that is a long ride.
Yeah, yes, it's about 400 miles each trip. So.
Yeah,
wow.
great.
We drove across Iowa, Gretchen, but it was very much not the same thing. We were in a car with air conditioning. And,
We were indeed. We were indeed. Okay, great. Did we miss anyone? Anybody else want to say hello? I think we might have gotten everyone. Maybe not though.
No, but you know what would be helpful, because Nicole, we haven't met, I don't think, and I'm wondering what your position is at SBCTC. Which unit are you in?
Yeah, I'm with Adult Basic Education. I'm a policy associate I run all of the integrated education and training programs in the state for our community and technical colleges. And one of them under my purview is an IET that is specifically connected to the workforce. It's an on-site workforce education training IET. So that's kind of my connection here.
Oh, that's fabulous. Thanks, Nicole.
Oh, that's very exciting. Great. Okay. Well, thank you all. Thanks for spending a couple minutes saying hello and playing around a little bit with Jamboard. We can move ahead to the next slide. And what we'd like to do now is just to talk a little bit more, really Eric set us up very nicely at the beginning, but talk a little bit more about the broader context and vision for the tool and some kind of related work to date. And then I will spend some time talking just in more detail around our project itself and the work that we'll be doing together and answer any questions that you have. So Eleni and Eric and Joe, I did want to see, at this point, is there anything else that you would like to share at this point in terms of sort of the genesis of this work and your overarching goals for what we're trying to support and achieve?
Yeah, thank you, Gretchen. just really briefly, and I think people are aware of this, that this sort of emanated from the board's work over the past year and a half to develop a collective impact initiative. And it started with looking at economic recovery post-pandemic. Of course, when they started this work, they thought post-pandemic was just a few months away. It's gone on, but it sort of grew into what they said would become a collective impact initiative to really end the economic disparities that we see across the state and have seen consistently across the state for many years. But just looking at the time since the Great Recession till now, where we had some real opportunities to make change after the Great Recession, and yet, what is it now, 10, 11 years later, we're still in the same place with so many people in so many communities. So how do we bring the best of all of us together and rowing in the same direction to get there? And the NGA WIN network opportunity came along at just the right time. And it allowed some of, especially the agency players, to work together to think about what are some next steps for us. And this tool idea at the front lines kind of emerged, and it emerged from this question as we were talking about the big picture, which was a lot about data sharing and service integration, but the data sharing was largely about dashboards and reporting differently and tracking differently. And somebody, and I can't remember who, asked the question, what does it do for the people at the front end? Like where's the meat for the not just the participants, but the frontline workers? How does it change for them? And that's where the idea of this tool came along. And so that's where we are today. And Eric, you were there from the very beginning.
Yeah, I think that context setting is great for this tool. What I wanted to add is actually to distinguish it from some other lines of work that are going on at the state level as well. Most notably, there has been an ongoing effort led primarily by Employment Security to put together a tool called the Platinum Package that several of our agencies have been working together on. We do want to note it's sort of complementary to this effort, but they are not the same thing. The way that they're very different, the Platinum Package tool is really meant to just be a level set for participants when they come into a one-stop that gives them a guide to some of our biggest programs that they might be eligible for, just as an informative piece of what they might have access to. What we're aiming for here is, I think, much trickier and probably more impactful, and goes to that meat for the people on the ground that Eleni was talking about, is we're really trying to create a tool or a guide that people themselves can have to quantify their assets, build confidence in what they're bringing to the table as they enter our system, and then have a conversation with frontline staff to match them with the pathway that's going to make sense. So if you have heard of this Platinum Package tool thing, and actually looking around at the table today, there's not a ton of overlap between those two groups. They are distinguishable from one another, although I serve on both groups, and we are trying to keep a through line between them. I think that's the only other thing I wanted to add. Joe, if you wanted to add anything as well, since you've been close to this, and if not, that's fine.
No, I think you guys have got it pretty covered. So
Great.
I'm going to let us move ahead.
All right.
Great. Well, thank you. I think that really helps set us up well in terms of kind of the guiding context and vision for the work that we'll be doing. So appreciate that. And with that, let's move on to slide 6. If you're following along in your browser, I want to spend just a couple minutes talking a little bit more about the nitty-gritty of the project work and the things that we will be focused on together. And then, as I said, take any questions that you might have. So we have a couple of key objectives and deliverables under this project in the NGA WIN effort. And the first, as we've been saying, and these are all mutually supportive, really objectives and deliverables, is the development and finalization of content for this common tool to be used really as both a counseling and planning tool for customers, but also a portfolio of sorts for them, that really catalogs their strengths and the assets that they're bringing to the table. To support that work, and we'll be talking about this today, we want to refine and finalize a currently draft charter that has been put together to outline the partners in this work, the work they'll be doing together, the timelines we'll be working on. So, just kind of a document that serves as a guidepost for the work together. So that's one of our deliverables as well. And then, as Eleni and Eric have referred to, a key piece of work for us will also be the development of a strategy or approach for piloting and evaluating the tool, starting, late spring, early summer. And then finally, because this is under the broader NGA umbrella, we will be working together to develop a final deliverable for NGA that will talk about the work that was done, the outcomes to date, things of that nature. So those are our key kind of activities and deliverables, and we can move on to slide 7. And in terms of our journey as a group together and with the others that will be joining us, this process moves forward. We will be coming together in 4 facilitated meetings that Lori and I will be with you for over the course of the next several months, this being meeting number 1. So today we will be focused on the charter draft and discussing that with you, as well as doing some ideation work to come up with some initial ideas for tool content. Meeting 2, which will take place in February, we hope to finalize the charter that will guide the work going forward and continue tool development. At the March meeting, meeting 3, we're hoping at that point we will have a prototype of the tool that we can work together to refine, and then also begin mapping out the strategy for the pilot itself. And then at the April meeting, meeting 4, we will be looking to finalize that pilot strategy and the deliverable for NGA, which I think we'll get some more detail and guidance from NGA about that as we move forward, and then talk about next steps in the project. And I should say, Lori and I will be supporting this project through May, June. So this is sort of the timeline for our work together with you. Certainly there will be work after that as well. But that's the timeline for our work with you. And then in between our monthly meetings, we're going to be asking you for some help around some work to be done in between. We've called that homework here. I don't mean that to sound punitive, but continuing to build out the tool, continuing to refine the charter. And so we'll be talking about those next steps more specifically later in the meeting. We can move on to the next frame 8, we're moving on to. Okay, we thought it would be helpful as we're kicking off our work together as a team to brainstorm a couple of different norms, if you will, or principles that will guide our work. And so we gave some thought to things that came to our minds in advance, such as keeping customers at the center of this team's work, really thinking about what might be possible and trying to focus on what's possible, active contribution in meetings and in between meetings, taking that sort of improv-based yes and approach, right? So building off one another's ideas and trying to add to them, sharing what's on your minds, and also hearing what's on others' minds. So these seem to be helpful kind of principles to guide our work going forward. We wanted to share those with you and see if there are any others that you would like to add to guide our work moving forward.
Oh, this is Michael, Department of Services for the Blind. Accessibility of any tool. I don't know if it's already listed, but that's going to be key for a range of people to have tools that are accessible. If it's a digital tool, that they've got access to the ways to access that as well, but also for electronic accessibility and usability for those who use adaptive softwares.
Absolutely. That is a great addition. Thank you, Michael, for that. Anyone else? Okay. Well, thanks. That's a really important addition. I appreciate you raising it, Michael, and that's great. We'll be sharing with you after this meeting the worked in version of the Jamboard, so you'll get a chance to see this again as we go forward, and I'm really glad that we've added that to our norms and principles. All right. Let us move on to slide 9 then. And I just want to talk before we dig in here about today's specific objectives and our agenda for today. So as I mentioned, we want to work with you. We want to share with you the project charter. I believe that was shared as a pre-read in advance of the meeting, talk through some highlights and get your initial feedback on that. Then we really do want to dig into brainstorming content for the tool itself. We're hoping that we can walk away today with having at least a pretty solid idea of when we'd like to schedule our next meeting in February. And we may even be able to firm down the actual date and time, which would be great. And then talk about homework between now and our second meeting. So that's what's on our agenda for today. And we can move ahead to slide 10. I want to pause there and see if folks have any questions for me or Lori or Eleni, Eric, or Joe before we dig into talking about the charter.
Yeah, so I was invited through my director, so I didn't get a copy of that charter. So if I put my email in the chat, would somebody be able to send that over to me at some point? And then the other question that I had was, do you all have a name for your project yet?
That's a great questions.
I can say no to the second one. We don't have a name. We call it the Tool Project. Or the NGA Project or something like that. We got to come up with a name. But yes, we can forward you the all the information. Joe, do you have that email handy that you can just send with the 3 pieces?
Yeah, I see your email address there, and I'll just send you those 3 pieces of information real quick.
One of those pieces is the charter. So
yes.
But there's some other good information too. The agenda for today is in there. Yeah, sorry about that.
Well, I've got a couple of questions. I have read through the materials, the charter and everything, and heard, I wasn't part of the conversations last year in kind of developing these ideas. The tool that we're looking to do is, I heard both that it's a tool for our frontline workers, but it's also a tool for the individual participants. And I think the result is to identify early on the range of needs, the range of gaps, the range of what have you, to get people connected to services. But maybe I'm wrong about the ultimate result. So I'd love a little bit more conversation on that. Mm-hmm. As well, it feels like it's a very intimate group here with 2 VR individuals, agencies represented. There's a whole list of partners that are part of the conversation, but not here today. And do we know, I mean, Eric, I don't know anything about the Platinum package, but do other partners think that this tool is already taken care of through the Platinum package, or are they just not here today because it's the 3rd week in January and 2022 has been a crazy year already?
Yeah, so I can start with the second part question, Michael, is they were all invited, and I think it's just because it's legislative session, but that's also in part why we're recording the meeting so that they can continue to hit the ground running even if they weren't able to make it today. In terms of overlap, there is no real perceived overlap between those 2 projects, at least on the ESD and SBCPC side. And those are the primary partners we work with, along with WASAC on the Platinum Plan tools. Both WASAC and ESD are considered key members of this team. They have representatives that are going to be serving on this group, and we'll be getting the video from today's meeting. And then Eleni, I don't know, do you want me to tackle the sort of dual audience question? Because I feel like you can.
I can do that. But I did want to say, I think we are looking at the Platinum package as complementary to this tool, because it really is all about giving both the participant and the frontline worker of whatever service entry point people come in at all the information of what's available out there. But the idea of the tool came about, as I said, we talked a lot about data sharing, and we could get to the point of, or at least closest to the point of data sharing for performance reporting. Not that we're there yet, but closest there. Where we keep running into barriers is when we talk about data sharing for service planning and case management. At that intake level, we just can't share data across service systems. And we were talking about what the detriments are to the participant when you do that. We've talked a lot about how this participant has to tell their story over and over again, and it's tiring. And we have that intake fatigue, and we lose people in the system. We also force people to narrate their story as victims. And that's such a downer, especially when you're telling it over and over again, right? And we wanted to change their narrative so that they're the heroes of their own narratives. And so that idea of having them tell a story where we can help them identify the assets and how these experiences are actually achievements. The fact that they got to our door today is an achievement, and we want to codify that. But we can't share the information in that portfolio across our systems unless the individual allows us to share that information. So that's why the portfolio is owned by the participant. Each agency, each service entity will still own its own data, but then the participant will have the ability to share the portfolio with the service provider and say, okay, here's what I developed, with my VR person, or here's what I developed at SBCTC. So I'll sign something that says you can put this all together. So we're all looking at the same plan at the same time. But yes, in there too will be the identification of gaps and needs, and what the service plan is to fill them. But we don't want to focus on the needs as deficits, in that sense. But they're stepping stones that someone, or milestones that someone has to meet, that builds on their achievements and accomplishments. So that's that asset focused kind of a thing. We still get to the same place, but it's, again, the two big tickets are the asset-based or strength-based motivational approach, and that the participant is making the determination to give us the information from the different services or not, which they can do now. It's just that we don't ask them, and we don't have a formal way to ask them. Does that help? Does that make sense? I mean,
Sounds like creating a tool that they're going to potentially hand to whatever service provider, so the story's already written, they don't have to repeat it. Is that right? The main thrust of that? And
written in a positive way, right? I mean, written so that they're not a victim. Not that they haven't had barriers and problems, because we want those exemplified as part of what gives them strength. I mean, it is a little outside of our normative ways, right? I mean, we really are talking about changing the culture of frontline services across our agencies in a big way.
And I'd like to jump in here. And
yeah, sure, Terry.
Again, this is Terry Redmond, DVR, Washington State General. I guess I have a question and also some comments. So my question is, was OSPI recruited to be part of this? I think the school system is a good place to start with that narrative being positive. And it doesn't always happen. And Michael, you can speak to this maybe as well. And you know, it's not a knock against the school system, but I think there's an opportunity for us to all be on the same page when it comes to creating that narrative in a positive way. When you look at the individuals that we're working with, and I'm talking about Washington in general, you know, they've gone through the school system for a number of hours more substantial than we'll have with those individuals. So their view of their abilities really has to start young. You know, it's always that, you know, the mindset that people bring to, you know, any type of social service or other type of engagement. And I think we have to make sure that the schools are participating, because again, they've got these individuals for more hours than we will. And our program in Washington General is seen as being a very short-term program. So that would be my thought, is that school system, I know it's a very vast system, maybe hard to, you know, get connected in a process like this, but it would be great if we could do that. And DVR is attempting to do that in other kind of realms as well, job foundations and school to work, and some of our transition activities. So that's the question around OSPI. And then my comment would be, this sounds like an electronic passport in my mind, really taking the information in a way where, like you said, it's being told once, and the individual has control of that narrative in a way where it presents them in a good light versus as a victim. And I agree. There are times when I'm thinking back to VRC, when I worked as a voc rehab counselor, that I had those kind of, you know, discussions with individuals where they talked about the negative side. And I think they were comfortable doing that initially. And then, you know, my skill set was such that I would help them move away from that. So I think there is part of that initial kind of, I need to have a confidential person to disclose this to, and then let's move on to, you know, the positives. But you have to remember that the individuals that we're seeing with disabilities may have had years and years of negative reaction to their limitations and their desire to become employed. So it sounds like it's an electronic passport. I like the idea. Concerns about how it connects with our case management system, and we're about ready to implement a new system called Waves, which is going to replace our old system, STARS. And I've been around a long time, so I know these have been issues that have come up every year around, you know, how do we make it a one and done kind of system where once they're in, they don't have to replicate any of the information they've shared previously. So I like the idea. I'm kind of concerned about how it connects with on the ground computer systems and requirements by federal partners to have control of the data. Data is always hard to share. You know, on an individual basis, signing a release is one thing, but when you talk about a large group of individuals sharing, or a large group of individuals' information being shared at one time, it does become problematic. So that's kind of my thoughts and questions.
That's a lot of thoughts and questions, but all good. So let me start at the end and say, we're not yet at the point where we're talking about an electronic portal or portfolio, although I think it's everybody's intention to get there. Almost all of the agencies involved are at this place where they're re-engineering their MIS systems or case management systems or reporting systems in some way. SBCTC has, I think, just finalized their system and has gotten it in the throes of implementation. I think it's at all 34 colleges now, right?
Not yet, but we are almost there. We're on the home stretch.
Almost there, home stretch, right? So every agency was at this place saying, oh, please don't do anything that's going to throw our train off course, off the track. And so whatever it is we come up with at the point where we're ready to go electronic, we'll be looking at something that can cut across, that feeds into, that thankfully with new technology, it's a heck of a lot easier. Both new technology of the systems that our agencies are putting into place, and then the new technologies, the AI and software as a service kinds of things that'll make it easier to integrate this kind of a thing. So, but for now, the tool development and the piloting will be hard copy initially, or a Word document or something, right? And then I wanted to talk about the youth thing. So we did talk a bit about the youth stuff, and Eric, you probably have more insight into the OSPI pieces. I'll just say, in working with OSPI on another line of work, which is the credential transparency and credential pathways. We know that this is the kind of thing that OSPI, that the superintendent wants to have happen. He's very concerned about the 40% of high school graduates in this state that don't go on to any form of post-secondary education. And it's no surprise when you look at the economic trajectories for those students, it is not good. It's not just economic trajectories, it's the other paths that they take as well. And he knows that we've got to start changing their stories, their narratives at a much earlier in the pipeline development piece. But they have, 295 school districts and no authority over them. So it's very slow to get them to move. And when we said we would have to pilot this effort at the local level, getting them to try to identify local school districts to do this was a near impossibility. And so we said, for the pilot phase, this first effort, let's start with the adult participants in our system, and then take it and start spreading it out, and basically work with whoever's willing to work with us on it, whichever organization, service structures, in whichever regions, and then let's build from there. And I think OSPI will be right at the table with us. But Eric, do you have insights on that?
Yeah, I mean, beyond that, there are kind of two overlaps with OSPI here that we are keeping in mind, and we have been talking with the OSPI CTE staff about. It's with high school and beyond planning, and it's with pre-employment transition services for youth, which you brought up, Terry, is to Eleni's point, because this does feel like a boiling the ocean initiative. If we really go full bore on it, we were focusing on the adult side preliminarily, but from my perspective, it would be amiss if we don't have the conversation at some point in this process about how a tool could be used to help complement that pre-employment transition services for youth component as well. I think the conversation that needs to be had with young people who want to access those services is in many ways very similar to the conversation we're trying to have here about what assets you bring into the system and the story that you bring with you as well. So it is on the radar screen. OSPI was not part of the sort of first round working group with us on this grant, but I'm going to take that as an opportunity to re-engage them about perhaps coming on in the second round, at least to monitor the development of the tool, because I think you're right. I think there are some important connections there to be made. Certainly in terms of high school and beyond planning, like Eleni said, local districts have a ton of autonomy to do it the way they want. But OSBI has propagated some tools to try and at least create a bit of a platform that's standard. And we can learn from those tools, I think, as well as this comes to fruition. So I'll think about what we can do to bring that to the table as perhaps a model that we could look at to build from.
Right. These are terrific questions and comments. Thank you all. Any others before we move ahead?
This is Michael. I tend to be a little concrete sometimes in things, so I apologize if it becomes too theoretical. Motivational interviewing was mentioned as a potential tool that might be helpful. And that tool is designed to help people work through change. There are some aspects of motivational interviewing that's really good in terms of it's not about the counselor, it's not about the individual, it's the professional, it's about the customers. So that's really good. And there's always asking open-ended questions to get to that person's story. But the tool itself is for helping that individual create change in their lives. So I don't know if that's exactly the right tool. There's another tool called Dependable Strengths that sounds like maybe that's what we're trying to, more the idea of trying to help people identify what their inherent strengths are and be able to verbalize what those strengths are in any situation. They can always depend on these strengths, these things throughout their lives. And so I'm wondering in terms of getting to the information, how we're imagining that. And are we imagining a half-hour session with a navigator? Are we imagining some intensive coursework to get those individuals to be able to tell their story? I know, Terry, you were saying for youth, but also for adults who have lost their vision, they have no concept of any strengths. And that's a lot of the work that we do over years' time, is to help them understand they do have strengths. And, if you get the right tools and what have you, you're able to imagine all those strengths. But when you're just hit with that vision loss and you can't imagine doing all the things that you used to do when you had vision, you can't get to those strengths. So I'm just curious what the thought has been about what does that look like, getting that individual to be able to tell their story in a positive way. Long way, I'm sorry.
No, that's excellent. Because, when we made the decision, and this was, I think, during the recession, but I can't really remember, to start using motivational interviewing techniques across the board for all agencies. And the concepts were great. Everybody bought into them, but it was very clear that we did not have staff that felt like they could guide people to get that new vision. And so thankfully, the VR community stepped up as trainers. And we did a whole professional development thing across the state. And then some of the WDCs or work source centers actually did training programs or classes on site for groups of dislocated workers to take them through some of the steps. Others just did it in their office one-on-one. And I think it kind of depended on sort of the complexion of the work source center and what was going on and what made the most sense. So I think it's very clear that in order to implement this tool, there has to be training and support for the frontline workers to figure out how to do this. And I'd like to find funds to be able to make that work. I think once we have the tool piloted, then we have some fodder to ask for funds to do that kind of professional development and support. I'd love to have a network of coaches that work with frontline staff on this. I mean, I can think of all different ways to really roll this out, but we got to get through the piloting, the development and the piloting first. So I know Lori and Gretchen are going to talk about homework. Part of the homework is going to be to find some of those frontline people that we want to bring to the table to help us. And you folks will have a sense of the kinds of people who do this kind of motivational work either by training, by experience, or innately when they work with participants. And you know, we want you to help us find those people to help us really build out the tool.
Thank you both. That was, I appreciate your comments on Michael's question, Eleni. That was really helpful. And I think this is part of what we wanted to brainstorm with you today. And I do want to acknowledge, we have been joking throughout the start of this project that we wish we could have 4 hours of your time every time we met with you. We're a little bit behind schedule in terms of our agenda. We're going to try to catch up there. But I think that's one of the areas that we really want to brainstorm today is, number one, what are the key strengths that we really want to feature and highlight around the folks that you all serve? And also, what are the kinds of questions that can support helping customers understand what those strengths are and helping staff understand, what those strengths are. So, I think this is going to be iterative over time in terms of what this tool looks like, but we've got a couple different jumping off places today. And this conversation is so helpful to thinking through, how this might grow and develop as we move forward. I do, Eric and Eleni and Joe, I do want to check in on time just because we have about a half an hour left and see how you want to handle that, because we could spend just a minute or two going over the charter, or we could ask for charter feedback, which we were going to do anyway, via email or some other mechanism post today's meeting as a homework activity for meeting 2, so that we could just move into brainstorming right away. I wanted to see what you would prefer to do.
Yeah, my preference is to let folks spend some time with the charter. Let's just go over it briefly, and then people take it back and think about it. But I feel like we've got to get all the questions answered and talk through some of the discussion points that you talked about the tool itself. And then the next steps in getting some of those frontline people in, because those next steps are going to be critical to moving it forward. So that's my preference. What do others think? Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So we can just hit on a few highlights here,
Yes,
then.
please.
Great, thank you. So I just want to talk very briefly, just for a minute. We put together this draft charter, and it is indeed a draft, as you can see, and we expect and want to refine it in collaboration with you all to guide our work going forward. But it is, as with most charters, a document that has been drafted to outline the work of the group, the partners in the group, and their roles and commitments in the work moving forward. And Lori, I don't know, it could just be my screen. If there's any way to make that a little bit bigger, it might be easier for folks to see if they don't have it pulled up. Thank you, that's terrific. So I just want to hit on the vision and some of the key aspects of the phases of the charter. And the vision really is around partners collaborating to support these broader goals around economic self-sufficiency, economic opportunity for customers, as a way of really trying to get to more equitable outcomes, right, for all customers. And that this tool, and again, this will be iterative, is really designed to catalog strengths and accomplishments to support customers in their pathways, whether those are educational or work-related, facilitating their access to the services and supports that they might need, really trying to advance on that no wrong door service delivery concept. So no matter where they sort of touch the system first, we're hoping the tool can help them access the other parts of the system that they might need, and really ultimately support their well-being from a comprehensive perspective. So I think that's the guiding vision, and that's what we tried to articulate here in this draft charter. And if you want to scroll down to the chart on the next page, Lori, thank you. What we tried to do, and this is very much a first cut and probably doesn't have everything that ultimately we want to have in the charter, right? But we tried to lay out these 3 key phases. And the first is really tool content development and pilot strategy development. And that's really sort of from now to May. Phase 2, which would be more of May to September, is, as we've talked about, when we would like to pilot the sort of alpha version of the tool and evaluate how it's working and what might need to be refined. And then phase 3 is really kind of the fall into winter timeframe of 2022, where the partners will be working to make any refinements that might be necessary based upon what was learned coming out of the pilot. And so within those 3 phases, we've outlined some kind of key roles, commitments, outputs, deliverables, if you will. So again, this charter is really just a first draft, and we're really wanting your feedback on it. Things that you would add, anything that you have concerns about. So that will be part of our kind of homework activity in advance of meeting 2. But we did want to draw that to your attention in terms of where it stands as a first draft, and see if anybody, before we move into our brainstorming activity, has any initial feedback that they want to share here today.
I am just going to preemptively say that Michael's comments on an accessibility focus earlier, I think, is, a pretty clear miss that we will go through the document and ensure that we update.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, we can add that as a norm, and I certainly think articulating that focus as an objective of this work for sure. Thanks, Eric. Anyone else? Okay. Well, we'll give you a chance to chew on this, and we will come back to it in our next meeting. We'll be working on it more then, and we are going to look forward to your feedback on it between now and our next meeting. All right, so as I mentioned, we wanted to do some ideation work with you here today, and we intended for it to be rapid ideation, and now it's going to be rapid ideation, because we really want to get as much of your input as possible in the time that we have left. So if you all would go back to Jamboard in your browser window, we're going to be doing some collaborative work there together to brainstorm your input on a couple of really important initial pieces. So if you would move to slide 13 in the Jamboard, we would like to spend, let's say, hopefully up to about 20 minutes now doing some ideation work with you. And really, our focus here is on generating as many ideas as possible. We're focused on quantity, and we're not judging quality of ideas. We just really want to pick your brains and get as much down as we can as initial feedback for tool content, so that Lori and I can take that as our homework, put something together for you to react to and look at in advance of meeting 2. So we're just really trying to generate ideas here today, and this will be refined over time. So this is just our first attempt to gather your feedback, and we will be working on this iteratively over the course of the process together. So as we move into these questions that we're going to be exploring, I just want to encourage you to really think expansively and think outside the box. I mean, don't feel compelled or constrained at this point. We encourage you to think big as we consider these questions. So why don't we move on to the next frame 14. Thank you. All right, and so the first question that we have for you around generating potential content for the tool is really related to customer strengths and their assets. So what we want you to think about is what do we want to highlight about those strengths, about the assets that customers bring to the table? And we want to think really broadly about what those might be. So it might be experience, it might be credentials, it might be particular kind of traditional occupational skills, right? But we want to think about other skills as well as personal assets, family assets. So, some of these things include, for example, transportation, childcare, other personal assets like gumption and stick-to-itiveness and resilience that customers bring to the table. So what we'd like you to do is spend a minute thinking about this question. And then in Jamboard, just start putting stickies up with your ideas about what you think we want to know and highlight around customer strengths. And we're going to give folks a couple minutes just to put some ideas up here, and then we'll spend some time discussing before moving on to our next question. These are great. Thank you all for putting up some terrific ideas. As you can see, we're doing a little moving around to make sure you have enough space and seeing where we might group some things together. Okay, we'll continue to put up ones as they come to you, but I just want to take a look together at what you all have shared so far, because these are some fantastic areas and some really critical questions, which is great because that actually bleeds into the next area that we want to talk with you about as well. So let me just enlarge. So I'm just going to comment on a couple of these and see if you all want to chime in to elaborate at all. So definitely seeing some themes here on the left-hand side around sort of skills around persuasion, right? Sales and marketing, love that, and entrepreneurial attributes. So that's fantastic. Some real personal strength pieces here around empathy. That's come up a couple different ways. Caregiving and patience that are real critical attributes, organization and planning, understanding of the local labor market. So these are, in my view, a really nice mix of sort of, I don't like the term soft skills, but personal skills and skills that are either slightly more technical or can have technical value. People skills. And then some of the supportive assets. Okay, so travel, ability to travel, access to transportation. I think that's terrific. A lot of great comments around resiliency and grit, being able to transform situations or find ways through very challenging situations, and making do, as one of your comments said, with very little. Let me ask a question. The sticky note around ability to understand systems, would the person who put that there be comfortable saying a little bit more about that?
Sure, that was me, Terry Redmond. Just, again, if someone's connecting with multiple state organizations, the bureaucracy that they have to deal with
Gotcha.
is substantial, and just the ability to be able to adjust as they go from system to system is really important. And I almost put a sticky up talking about the kind of the transformational piece, the ability to be able to adjust as jobs change over time. There was a time when my parents worked in one field for 30 years, and that's not the reality of anyone involved in the labor force at this time. I mean, they're going to have multiple jobs, and the ability to go from market to market is kind of an important piece. But yeah, just that whole ability to understand the systems and think in kind of a broader sense than the lane that they're in now, see, sorry, my dog. But yeah, just thinking about that broader sense of the world versus just one lane or the 20 blocks that they live within. So a system has to be bigger than kind of where they're at now, and being able to see where they're going and being willing to adjust to that.
Those are great additions, and thank you, Lori. I think that was probably you that added the other one that Terry just talked about in terms of that adaptability and adjustability. Those are fantastic observations. Thanks, Terry, for talking more about those. Anybody else want to share comments, observations, or things that they would add?
I was thinking about what Terry was saying and folks who would navigate these systems and everything. Sometimes just knowing when to ask for help is a strength, you know, to support your family, to put a roof over their head, or I can't walk anymore, I need VR to help me figure this out, right? That is a strength that we undervalue a lot of the time. So I'd like to see that up there. And the other thing I was thinking about, and I didn't really know how to put it up here, is how do we ask the question, when can you remember a time where you felt really successful? I mean, I'd like to get that question on the table for them. And, you know, I used to work with young people and young people in very difficult situations who really felt beaten and disenfranchised. And that was one of my questions that I asked them. Was there ever a time when you felt like you had been successful at anything? And they always had a story. Sometimes it went back to when they were very little. Sometimes it was when they learned a concept in their math class. And sometimes, you know, one person helped their neighbor put in a walkway, and the neighbor thanked them and gave them $1. It was the first time anybody had ever said you're worthwhile. But those stories, and then from there, I could just sort of build from there. And I want to have that in there somehow. So I don't know how it goes in there.
Well, Eleni, that's great. And you actually, I don't want to cut this part of the conversation off, but I do want to take a couple of minutes on the next slide, which is that very what question should we be asking, right?
Oh, sorry.
This is perfect. So while you were talking, I plugged that in. We can wordsmith that if you'd like, but that's a terrific one. Before we move into these questions, anybody else want to say anything about these strengths and assets that we just talked about?
Yeah, I'd like to add to what Eleni just said, because what you're describing is exactly what they dial into in Dependable Strengths. I'm Dependable Strengths trained as a trainer. And so I also was a coach for several years in the field at the community college. And so what you're talking about and the ways in which to ask those questions, a lot of times, because it's counter to our popular culture where we call it bragging when we talk about our strengths, you have to get very creative in the ways in which you bring those out. And it's exactly what you said. It's asking their stories, experiences, earliest memories that were positive for folks. So yeah, I don't know how you put that all on one sticky note, but it's cool that we're going to have a chance to talk about some questions that we can ask, because I've got some examples that I used in the field.
Oh, that's terrific, Nicole. That's terrific.
I'm going to have to send Will a giant thank you for sending it to us.
That is great. Well, yeah, then why don't we then? Terrific. Let's move there and spend a few minutes there. So we're moving on to slide 16. Great, and I see people are already adding things. And you know, in the previous question that we were discussing with you, you already came up with some additional questions that I think we can have here as well. How do you learn best? You know, what's your learning style? What's the motto of your life? I loved that one. Whoever came up with that was great. You know, what are your technology skills? I think was one that somebody put up there. So I think there's some other, you know, there's some overlaps between these two. But thinking about what are the right questions? What are good questions, productive questions to be asking customers to further explore their experiences, their strengths, and what they're bringing to the table? So same thing, if you could spend a couple minutes just putting your ideas up here, and then we'll chat about them. These are great. Lori, I'm probably working at cross purposes to you. Am I moving things that you're trying to move? Should I just keep my hands off stickies?
You do whatever you need to do. You're fine.
These are great. So please keep adding them as they occur to you. These are some of these I have to say, I mean, they're lovely questions. They're very moving. And this makes me very, very excited for the work that this group is going to do together around this tool. Really, really, really exciting and thought-provoking. Do folks want to comment on any of the questions that they put up? Anything that they'd like to say a little bit more about? And those of you who are, like you, Nicole, and Michael, sounds like you're familiar, Terry, you probably are too, who are very familiar with these kinds of questions from Dependable Strengths and that model. Anything that you want to say sort of broadly around how we should be thinking about these questions and what kinds of questions are most effective?
I think considering that in order to get a true answer to these questions, relationships have to be built. So people are not just going to walk into an office at the Frontline and spill out all of these very personal types of memories that are sometimes attached to good things in their life and sometimes attached to bad things. And so I think just keeping in mind that the folks who are going to be asking these questions, they'll have to be a component of relationship building that occurs around these as well.
Super helpful. Thank you. Others want to comment or say more about what they've shared here on this slide?
I would, kind of underline, Nicole, what you said, that relationship, trust has to be there. I mean, we're not as a society very open to people talking about their strengths, and we tend to be very shy about, self-promotion and or what have you. And this is different than self-promotion, but it has to get at those strengths in a gentle way, so people aren't feeling like I'm just, I'm being immodest or having judgment or what have you. It's going to take some skill.
Absolutely.
And I'll add as well to what Nicole and Michael have said. You have to also, consider the cultural piece as well. There's certain cultures where you're not supposed to promote yourself. And I think it does take that expertise and skill set to make sure that you understand the individual that's across the table from you and build that trust before you go there or don't go there because it's inappropriate. So that equity, diversity, and inclusion piece, is very important kind of going forward with any type of tool like this.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you said that, Terry. Thank you, because I think that whole cultural competency piece is really essential here. And as you said as well, the diversity and equity and inclusion focus. And I think that's another thing that I think we need to frame, for example, in our charter, that's one of our guiding, this is a focus for the work that we're doing. I really appreciate that. And Eleni, these comments also make me think of your earlier comment. And I know this is one of the key goals of the pilot, but there are going to be training and staff development needs very likely around bringing this to scale. And so these are just some really important things, I think, that we can have in our minds as we think about what those needs might be.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are great.
They are. This is super exciting. All right.
And I'll just add that when I ask these kinds of questions, and then was able to pull out these strengths. You all, I don't know if you've ever used this strategy, but to see someone's face literally light up and say, I didn't know that as a stay-at-home mom that I am organized, that I'm a financial planner, that I'm a spatial designer, like it is just incredible to see the strategy work. So I can tell you that it is so effective and it does work. So this is really, really exciting.
Yes.
I'm going to thank
yes.
Will too for letting him, for having him recommend that I be a part of this. This is really, really cool work.
Yay, yay.
Yay. Indeed. This is great. Well, and like I said, we've got a couple minutes of wrap up that we need to do, but we are going to send you, we'll resend you the link to the Jamboard over email, and we'll keep this open in edit mode. So if folks have ideas after today's meeting that they want to add, you'll be able to do that. So this is really fantastic and exciting. I echo the level of excitement about just our initial work together today. Thank you. All righty, so why don't we move on then to slide 18. I want to talk a little bit about kind of next steps with you so that we can get you out on time. So we did want to talk with you about scheduling. Let's see how far we can get here today in the couple of minutes that we have left. We are looking to have our next meeting either the week of February 14th or February 21st. And it'll be another 90-minute meeting. The window that we're looking at, because Lori and I are on East Coast time, so we wanted to translate it for ourselves, is 9 in the morning your time till 2 in the afternoon your time, and wanted to get a sense from the group. Do you have any sense of, particularly good or bad days, or is it mornings that are bad, afternoons are more open? Can you give us any feedback on either of those weeks, or what generally might be a good meeting time for all of you?
The 21st is a holiday, President's Day.
Right. So we would avoid that Monday for sure.
It's the week of, gotcha.
Oh yes, week of. And I know it's busy with the ledge session now. So, we're certainly mindful of that too. But any sense of do either of these weeks look better or worse for you?
Week of the 21st, way better than the week of 14th. Week
Okay.
of 14th, not at all.
Yeah, and I'll just note too, I mean, during legislative session, Fridays do tend to work fairly well because the hearing schedules are a little less crazy. Given that it'll be sort of the end of the session, it just might be perpetually crazy, but like Fridays are probably our safest bet for this time of year.
Okay. Terry, I saw a thumbs up from you. So should we, and we can also, Eric and team, you let me know, we could do a little doodle poll for the week of the 21st, or if this group is comfortable, we could look at that Friday afternoon, which I don't have my calendar pulled up, but what would that be? It would be Friday the 25th. Yeah.
Or that Friday morning, is that possible?
In the morning?
Yeah, at this stage, to be honest, y'all, the doodle polls, they get lost in the mix of everything going on this time of year. Like what I would prefer is if we could set at least a tentative time to hold, and we will, as we announce that date out to partners, ask them to let us know if there are any significant, overlaps to be aware of. That would be my preference, so we can get something carved out now. And if we do need to adjust it on that same day due to some other unforeseen thing, we can do that.
Okay.
So at SBCTC, in our department specifically, we will be reviewing RFPs for all of our 34 colleges. So I will not be available that Friday, the 25th at all. So just a heads up there.
Okay. Definitely good to know, because like Nicole, we super want you. So
Are there any other days that week that are okay for you?
Yeah, I think that we won't start reviewing until Tuesday, and Mondays are never fun for anybody, but we could do a Monday.
Okay, what do Mondays look like for you guys?
Monday's the holiday, I believe, on the 21st.
On that
Oh,
week.
that's right. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
But yeah, that whole week where our whole team is gonna
Yeah,
be.
I get it now. It's the whole week. Dang.
Would Monday, the 28th be an option? I know that that's going a little bit later than what we had originally thought, but we've got Monday, the 28th.
It's good for me, except for 9 to 10, but otherwise good.
I'm looking at least Eleni and Joe and I's calendars. I think we could swing pretty much anything after 10 p.m. or 10 a.m. Pacific.
Yep.
We could also do that Monday, the 28th.
Okay.
Well, it is a short month, so it's not like it's the last day normally, right?
Right. Right. Carrie, did you say you're available that day too?
Yes, I can make myself available on that day.
Lovely.
Great.
Okay. So it sounds like last day of February then. It's not a leap year.
Monday, at, like 10 to
Okay.
11:30 or so.
Is that good? Yeah, excellent. All right. Let's put that out and
Okay.
see what we get. Perfect.
So in terms of meeting recording and also ability to edit the whiteboard, we are going to send out the recording, a link to the recording via email to folks. We'll probably have to upload this to like YouTube, but we'll go ahead and make sure that people can catch up with the meeting. We'll also have the whiteboard open. So if we do have folks that weren't able to attend today that want to add on sticky notes, they can do so over the coming days. I know Gretchen and Lori will be checking in on it to see what else comes in, but if any of you are also curious, you'll have that link to check back in on, or just add any, late breaking thoughts you have. If you do add something after the fact, maybe shoot one of us an email just so we can prompt Gretchen and Lori and make sure that they see that it has been added. Okay.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, and I think just to add to that, in addition to any other thoughts that you may want to add to the Jamboard as we move forward, we'll put together a follow-up email as well with some things that we're looking for your help on, including feedback on the charter before our next meeting. Thanks, Lori. As well as putting together a draft that reflects the input that you shared today. So the other key piece of homework, and Eleni touched on this earlier, is we really would like your help in engaging frontline staff representatives to be important members of this group moving forward and the work moving forward. So we would ask for you to reach out to folks that you think would be great in that role, talk with them about the work that we're doing, get them engaged for the next meeting, and also share their contact info back with Eleni and Eric and Joe, just so that we can make sure that we have a complete list of folks that will be joining us for communications purposes. So those will be kind of the key asks before the next meeting. So in terms of next steps, on the next slide, Lori, if you don't mind moving forward. Again, we'll share the output from today's meeting and the charter and draft for your feedback. We appreciate your help engaging frontline staff to be part of this work, and continue to add any additional thoughts to the Jamboard. That will be really, really appreciated. I know we're a minute over, so Eleni and Eric and Joe, I'm going to turn it back over to you to wrap us up. I just want to say thanks so much to the group on behalf of me and Lori.
Yeah, I don't have anything other than thank you all, especially during the front end of legislative session. Super appreciate you making the time, and I'm really excited.
Me too. And I'm going to say thank you to all of you, and including Gretchen and Lori for taking us through. But we're a small group but mighty. So this was fabulous today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all, and I really appreciate you guys making it. I know everybody's busy, so I thought it was pretty productive and for the group we had.
Cool.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
All righty.
Well, have
And
a
a
good
good
weekend.
weekend,
Great
everybody,
weekend,
too.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Too.